Hello, sorted friends. So, in the last couple of days, we got some questions from a person on Facebook. Initials going by PH. I don't know his real name. He was posting under a page. And he had some questions regarding how Schola St. George teaches Fiore's material. In particular, he felt that having been a former student and studied some of our materials, there wasn't enough Fiore in the Fiore material. So he asked a few questions, and I'm here to provide at least an attempt at some answers. So these will be from my own copies. What I've got in front of me are three references. First this is Sword in Two Hands by Dr. Brian Price. This is the first edition. There is a second edition because the first edition became too difficult to obtain. There's a second edition. I just don't have a copy of it in front of me at the moment. I'm also going to refer to a reference called Pocket Armizare, which was an Android app you could formerly find in the Android store. I believe this is now no longer available, so I'm going to kind of cherish this. I find it very useful, but it allows us to look at the different things within the different manuscripts and cross-reference them. And all the text and the images are coming from Wichtenauer. So the information is freely available, just this app made it very convenient. And the third thing I'm going to look at is this is the Wichtenauer sort of recreation of the Getty manuscript, designed to be faithful, to kind of have the texture and feel and look of a untranscribed, untranslated version of the Getty, correct dimensions and everything. So let's get started. So within Schola St. George, at our beginning level, what we call our pre-level yellow belt level, we teach 6 plays, and these plays are designed to bring anyone from any background, whether they know anything about fencing, whether they have any experience in full contact martial arts, or any kind of sport or none, and we can bring them up to a level of safe sparring so that they can play with us and we can go on and we can learn the rest of Fiore's material as they progress. Now, the material that we're not teaching them directly is what's called the Zogho Largo, or Fiore's, for the Sword in Two Hands section, his long plays. And if we look here through let's see here. We're going to look at the Getty manuscript, which is the one that we use primarily. We're going to look at the two-handed sword, long plays. And this is the Zogho Largo section of the Getty manuscript. And we'll come back to this. But the question was, if we're sort of synthesizing material to teach to our beginning students, how does that material relate to what Fiore actually writes? Now, the person to whom I'm responding claimed they had a copy of this book, both editions, and they didn't see the direct references to Fiore in the book. So let's go through it. Now, in the second edition, the numbering of the plays changed. So, don't worry about the play number. We'll just go by the English description of the play. Now, play number 1 is Slipping the Leg, and it says, drawn from Fiore's 5th play of the Zogho Largo. So if we come back here, and we go, let's see here, wide plays, number 1 through 5. Now the numbering might be different depending on what version of the manuscript and such you're looking at. So these are all our crossings at Mezza Spada, the different remedies or scholars. Let's see here. Counter. Okay, so these are just numbered differently. So in this particular reference, and I believe that the Getty for this is using the Colin Hatcher and Tracy Mello translation. It'll use their numbering. So this is being called the 6th scholar. And you can see this is Slipping the Leg. If you can read the text, it's saying if your opponent strikes your leg, withdraw your front foot, and strike him back in the head and the arms and whatnot. This is pretty standard interpretation of Slipping the Leg. And if we want to, if we can show here within our manuscript, here we go. And the PH wanted a direct reference, so that would be folio 28, and you can call this, I think it's called recto and verso. Please don't quote me on that. I might get the R's and the V's mixed up, but down here in the bottom left of the right side of folio 28. And that's the same image you see here. And it's pretty much the same image you see here. This comes from the Getty. There will be images within this book that are coming from the Getty and some from the Pisani Dossi, 2 different Fiore manuscripts. So there's a direct relationship there and a direct reference. All right, so if we skip forward, play 2. I'm not going to go into all these things in detail. So play 2 is we're basically doing beats against thrusts. So drawn from Fiore's description of Tutta Porta di Ferro and the 8th play of the Zogho Largo. So again, the 8th play of the Zogho Largo is the Scambiere di Punta, or is the Rebattimento versus Punta. Let's see here, and that is here. This is, these plays here are what's happening. Let me double check. Actually, no, that's actually Zogho Stretto. So let me see. Where's my Zogho Largo? See, that's 5th play. Maybe I am mistaken. Yeah, these are beats. I believe this is exchange of thrusts, and this is a remedy on exchange of thrusts. This is a beating the sword down and then stepping on the sword. So this is basically what we're talking about here. We're beating down a thrust, and then with some follow-on action, plausibly. So again, and depending on your number, we call this the 8th play. The beating of the thrust is what Schola calls the 8th play. Other groups may call it something different, just depending on the different scholars and remedies and counter remedies. There's also a mention, though, that it's drawn from Fiore's description of Tutta Porta di Ferro, and there's also this image which has some additional text saying this. Oops, let me get that out of the way. The sequence is from the Getty, folio 20. Fiore discusses the single-hand principle of the Rebattimento against all 3 different kinds of attacks, including thrusts, strikes, and thrown weapons, which he does. He says, these 3 people are coming after this master 1-at-1. The one on the left is going to throw his sword, the one in the middle is going to strike him, and the one in the front is going to thrust him. And it's the one-handed sword play. So we can show kind of that text as well. And it's kind of way back here in the sword in one hand section. And there we go. And we can see, look, it says folio 22 in my copy. So it's entirely possible that either the version of the Getty which was being used for this may have had a different numbering. But again, this is supposed to be the Getty as it actually exists in the Getty Museum, reproduced from the highest quality scans available, a couple years ago. All right, so that's references for play number 2. Play number 3 is very simple. It is very similar. So it's not just the beat of the sword, but there's some follow-on actions that we teach people, because these plays 2 and 3, are really teaching people how to use their entire body, how to move and how to strike and defend themselves, all as sort of one continuous series of actions. I've actually, all year long, I've been teaching our beginners class. I found these really, really useful to sort of teach that full body range of motion that people need to learn in order to do this stuff effectively. So I actually find that this distillation has been really useful to bring people along who've never had to move their feet and strike with their arms all at the same time. It really helps teach people, and also teaches people how to make multiple steps sequentially. That's actually relatively difficult for some people. Most people don't practice making small accessories or sliding steps back to back to back. And doing so while having to think about what else you're doing. So these plays help develop those skills. All right, so play 3 is Rebattimento versus Colpi. So very similar, except instead of against a thrust, we're going against a blow. This is essentially we're beating down a blow. This is a variant of Fiore's description of Rebattimento in Tutta Porta di Ferro. So, Tutta Porta di Ferro is one of our 2-handed sword guards. See here, and here we go. Tutta Porta di Ferro. Now again, this is not transcribed, so if you'll give me a moment. Let's go back. Let's see here. I need to go back. Kind of hard to hold the sword and hold the phone and look at this at the same time. Longsword Fundamentals. Longsword Stances Part 2. There we go. Tutta Porta di Ferro. Alright. Here begin the guards of the 2-handed sword, of which there are 12. The first is Tutta Porta di Ferro. Very strong, very good guard. The weight and attack, every kind of handheld weapon, whether it's length, as long as you own the sword is not too long. From this guard, you make cover. By passing, you move to the narrow game, meaning you step forward strongly. Or you can exchange thrusts, striking home with yours. Again, exchange of the thrust is a play that's demonstrated later. Or as your step, you can beat the opponent's thrust to the ground, and this card can cover attacks from all angles. So, you can beat thrust to the ground from Portaferro. We're also going to beat Colpi, or blows. There's also some other notes here. Saying Getty 20... Oh, let me focus there. Getty 23 verso. It also rebates the point to the ground, going away with a passo, and from every Colpi. So it's a different translation of the same thing. And again, it says 23. This one we're saying this is folio 26. And so verso is going to be the left, and recto will be the right. Unless I'm just incorrect, and it's recto and verso. I don't know, guys. I don't know how medieval books are necessarily laid out, but I will trust that the references are correct from at least the point of view of the translations and transcriptions that were being used at the time that Sword in Two Hands was being written, which by this point is probably 20 years ago. So in 2025, I think we can forgive some small inaccuracies from a book that was written in 2005, 2009, sometime in that time frame. But again, this is what we're referring to. I would also say that, well, this is, it's discussed as Tutto Portaferro. This is also going to be an example of, since we're talking about beats, this is also from that same play where while we're beating down the thrust, you can sort of kind of also infer that the second master of the Zogho Largo, which is crossing at Mezzaspada, he also has ways that he beats. In particular, this kind of action only works if you've won the crossing, whether through movement, whether beating the sword down some other way. You have to win the crossing in order to strike. This is essentially called a same-side strike. I'm not moving around his sword. His sword is away from me enough that I can safely strike him and sort of disable him. And that's the first scholar, or the first remedy to what happens at the Mezzaspada crossing. Well, beating the sword is pretty much a remedy. If that sword's way offline, it gives me a lot of purchase to do anything I want to. So while it's not mentioned here, I think this is a legitimate sort of reference for what this play is being used to develop. All right, moving on. Play 4 is, I would say, universally one of the most favorite that everybody likes to do, and this is called the Ridoppiando versus Colpi. This is basically a beat from behind. See, the text says, a variant of Fiore's description of Ribattimento and the Ridoppiando expressed in the Pisani Dasi Colpi Mazzani. That'll take me a moment to find, but I believe it's also in another section. Let's see here. It says PD figures showing croce have been modified. So this is a modification. So this is why this tool is really useful. So two-handed longsword fundamentals, longsword stances. I think Dente di Zingaro is one of the last stances. That's Portaferro. There we go. So Dente di Zingaro, well, he said that it's from the Pisani Dasi. So, all right, this doesn't say much. So he said it was from the Colpi Mazzani. Okay, so we need to go back. Attacking with the longsword. Okay, this is where we get into our Colpi. Here's our Mazzani. Middle blows the Mazzani were so-called downward blows, rising. Go through the middle, path downward blows, rising blows when you strike with the true edge. Alright, see what the PD says. The blows go thwarting from the knee and above we go wounding. Go thwarting from the knee and above we go wounding. And we beat the thrusts out of the way. That's kind of what we're talking about. And redoubling the blow, which is what this is trying to say. Ridoppiando is redoubling, means I'm beating the sword and I'm sort of sending it along the same direction it was going. So redoubling the bow, striking is our deal. And if the middle blow entering cleaving, we waste many people with such blows. Okay, so redoubling the blow is essentially what we're talking about here. I would also say that there's very similar actions within the sword in one hand section. I did try to find it just a moment ago, but There wasn't an image in text that clearly sort of demonstrates that in an easy way, so I'm not going to try to show it here. But I would say this sort of action from Dente di Jingaro, where if you accept my finger is the sword, where you beat above and then strike back down, redoubling, sending that sword on its way, and strike. This is a Satani Mandrito, so going from your left hip up towards your right shoulder, and then that beats the sword from behind, and you strike back down. Again, this is a real fun play. Everybody loves it. The Pisani Dossi is also great because it shows able to do this from on the uses Coda Longa, where the sword is oriented behind the scholar, and he beats it from the other direction. So he can beat it this way and strike him on the left side of his body. Hopefully that's clear. But that's also in the Pisani Dossi. Forgive me if I don't go looking for it, because I'm trying to get through this. Alright, then we have... See, this one's got a lot of fun stuff in it. Alright, so play 5, Finding the Point. Now this is one where I'm going to say that maybe the reference here is, well, it's fine. Based on Fiore's 7th play of the Zogho Largo, which is the Scambio de Punto, or Exchange of the Thrust, and effective use of the thrusting posta. So really what this is the way we teach this is that you're going to come to the cross, and you're going to feel different pressures. The other way we talk about it is when you come to the cross, do you overbind? Is it neutral, or are you overbound? And then look at where your point falls in between. Let's see here. This is the scholar. So you look to see where your point, I'm going to still use him because it's more clear. Your point needs to be within the frame of his body in order for this to be an effective thing. And then you thrust accordingly through different posta. And you can see here we talk about doing it through breva. We talk about doing it through bicorno. We used to, in our group, we used to teach doing it through fenestra, but we've sort of fallen out of favor of that, and that was the case when you are overbound. It's using fenestra to kind of find leverage, and we found that, particularly with the training swords we use, it's just not very effective. It's not very easy to train, and we didn't have a lot of success with it. So we stopped teaching that aspect of it. We're still developing kind of what to replace it, which really is kind of like the second master of the Zogho Largo, something we teach at the next level of material. We also have a combination where we're using something that looks kind of like bicorno, but then sort of moves up to fenestra, sort of transitions between these two. We sometimes call it binestra, is a sort of a cheeky joke, but it allows you to kind of move a sword and create some leverage. But those are all things that we're trying to teach here, which is, in addition to sort of like the thrusting itself, it's also being able to determine like those decisions at the moment of contact. Because previous plays, there really wasn't a lot of decisions to be made at the moment of contact. You sort of did the thing, and then there was an opening that's created. Here, your training partner, the jugador, or companion, depending on which school you're in, you may call it one or the other, but your compliant training partner is giving you some resistance that you have to decide what to do about. So part of the point of this play, and why we don't teach like straight up to the Zogho Largo, is that this is teaching how to make decisions at the crossing. So again, that's a skill, much like moving successively in multiple movements in succession is a skill you have to train, you have to develop, independent of the framework that we're working in. This is another skill, how to make a decision at the crossing. And sometimes, if you're really good, how to start making that decision before the crossing, because you can predict how this is going to cross. Harder to do at full speed, easier to do with a compliant training partner. Play 6, and this is the last of what we call our Elephante plays. So capture with the hand at the fortezza. Now we don't typically show this part, we do show this, which is, we call it capture with frontale. So you're basically either coming to the cross and then pushing into frontale, or you're catching their blow in frontale and then doing some follow-on actions. And we only, frontale is called by Fiore, is called the gateway to stretto, which is, or the close place, where you're able to manipulate the blade, or you're able to manipulate your opponent's body. We teach 3 reactions here. You can see right here, one of the most famous is the crown wearing putz is going to kick you in the nuts. The other 2 that we typically teach is going to be some kind of pommel strike underneath, or pushing on the pommel to push it over their shoulder, and then pushing of the elbow, which is, I think, probably the most fundamental striatal play there is, because you're directly controlling the body and you're sort of pushing them around. And again, this says based on the third and sixth plays of the Zogho Largo. The third is the capture of the sword after the crossing at mezza spada, and the sixth play is going to be capture of the frontale. And again, we can see this is the Getty. And we can see there's that third play, which comes after. This is the master at mezza spada, which we call our second play. This is basically sort of the first reaction, and then this is our capture with front. This is our sword grab with something else to do with the sword grab, and then our capture with frontale. We come here, which would be sixth play. All right, and again, those are, folio 28, and I guess this is the reverse or the of the folio 27. So I hope that's helpful, showing that these things, even though we've sort of synthesized our own, or Dr. Price synthesized some plays to teach this material before we get into learning the actual Zogho Largo as it exists. And that's really just to bring new students along who have no experience or potentially no experience, and to make them both safe and to teach basic skills kind of in isolation. At least that's one way that you can train things, particularly physical skills, as you isolate the things that you need to do, and you teach things in isolation, and then you start chaining things together. For instance, when we spar, we have people do what we call line drills, or one intention drills. Someone's in the middle will get one intention. I make one strike. The person on the other side has to cover that strike or avoid that strike, do something with that strike, and then do a returning action, typically striking the person in the middle, or somehow doing something fall on. Well, then you increase that to 2 reactions, and then 3. Typically, we don't take it past 3, but that teaches how to chain things, multiple actions in a row, in kind of a nice, safe, compliant manner that people don't get frustrated with. You're not doing it at full speed. Likewise, we're not teaching this at full speed. We teach this so that when we get to this, you know a few things, you can do some things. Now, part of that is because when we do teach the Zogho Largo, we want to, you've done all the posta. You understand the posta, you know how to use them, you have a very basic understanding of what all these blocks of text mean, and all the different options, or at least a good number of the options you can do from here that are described in the text. And we certainly encourage students to get a copy of the manuscript, not necessarily this one. This was kind of a collector's item, a reproduction more than anything, but a copy of a translation of the manuscript so that you can read the text and kind of look and understand what it's being said, how it's laid out. But our standpoint, and I think that's a very common one, is that the Zogho Largo itself is you can call it a tactile framework. You can call it the OODA loop. If you're really cheeky, you can say Indes. I worked with a class at WMAW last year with James Riley, who's a pretty well-known trains in Lichtenauer's School of Arts. And he was teaching something all about, reading your opponent, reacting to your opponent, how you react it. Dude, it was all first, second master of battle here. It was all Zogho Largo, but from a Lichtenauer perspective, using Lichtenauer words. But it was all the same stuff. It was the same framework, the same tactical thing that you could apply. It was quite beautiful, and quite nice to see that kind of sort of, I won't say cross-pollination, but to recognize that the ideas here are shared with other arts as they should be, as we should expect. But again, that's showing, demonstrating, I hope, somewhat succinctly and successfully that the things that are done here, taught in this book, in its second volume, second edition, are things that are present within Fiore Zogho Largo. There was a question about what do we teach is the Zogho Largo. Well, let's be clear. The Zogho Largo, is called so because there's this word. Let's see here. I looked at, there we go. This is saying plays of the sword in 2 hands, Zogho Largo, right there. Zogho Largo. That's all this material. And it goes until, let me be clear here, till there. And I say, don't ask me to translate the script, but we see Zogho Largo there. And then we see something, plays of the sword, two hands Zogho Stretto. So the Zogho Largo literally ends right here, which will be folio 29 verso, I guess, is the end of Zogho Largo, comprising, you know, just several pages of material. And then we get into the Zogho Stretto, which are the close plays where you can start manipulating your opponent. Hope that's helpful. I think there was one other question about what were the cinque kosei. Particularly that they had found something in Dr. Price's material, whether it was Sword in Two Hands or it was the unpublished Master of the Cross Swords, which is used by Schola students to reference for training the Zogho Largo and the material that we do what we call our blue belt. He said that he found a reference that the cinque kosei were listed as some really weird thing. Unfortunately, he can't give me a reference to any page number. He can't tell me what they were. But here's the cinque kosei. The cinque kosei basically says you can strike. You can... let's see here. Let me make sure I'm getting it. Maybe I might be getting things wrong. I thought this was pressa, but I think this is strike. This is disarm. You can lock or break, and then you can throw someone to the ground. So I may have been posting them on Facebook incorrectly, but yeah, I'll correct that in my own base of knowledge. So PH, I hope that's helpful. Hope it's kind of what you wanted. It's basically the best I can do tonight. All right, thanks. Have a good day.